Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be ranking Doctor Who by decade, but specifically the strength of the Dalek stories. So we're going to be looking at Dalek stories and how that decade fares by them, the strength of how strong the Dalek stories are. From worst to best. This was an interesting idea, and I thought it's a good way to expand on ranking Doctor Who by decade, which I had done recently where I just ranked it overall by decade. But we're going to be looking specifically at stories primarily featuring the Daleks. Now, the 90s will not be on this list because I'm not really including all of the Big Finish books. I'm really just going by the show, and we really only have the movie, and the Daleks, for all intents and purposes, aren't really in it. So there won't be a 90s in this. We'll be looking at the 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. Number 6 on the list, in last place, is the 2010s. Stephen Moffat really didn't know what to do with the Daleks, let's just be honest. He doesn't have any Dalek stories that I think are just home runs. Nothing where he knocks it out of the park. Not one. I think the best one in the 2010s is probably Victory of the Daleks, which I enjoy. It's got flaws, and it's definitely a retread of Power of the Daleks while not being anywhere nearly as good as Power of the Daleks. But I enjoy it. It has a couple of little silly moments like the World War II planes and space. I don't mind the Paradigm Daleks like I did when the episode first aired. It's fine, even though they kind of got quickly shuffled off screen. But for me, that's the best one of the decade. Moffat really didn't know what to do with them. I mean, they kind of showed up in small bits and pieces in episodes, but to me, that didn't help matters with them just kind of randomly showing up for a little bit piece, sometimes as background dressing. Asylum of the Daleks is another one that it's fun, but it has a lot of flaws. The Daleks even having an asylum doesn't make sense and kind of goes against how you think the Daleks would think. I mean, the Daleks tend to kill faulty Daleks, not put them in an asylum. So the whole premise is weird. The whole Amy and Rory not, having problems and a divorcing thing is just forced because the plot needs it to be that. It's still a fun episode. I like Asylum of the Daleks, but it definitely has its problems. Into the Dalek, again, fun, but not great. Like, it doesn't just blow me away, but it's fine. Really leans into the Am I a Good Man thing Series 8 was going for, but again, there's just not any Dalek stories that really just blow me out of the water. Like, Resolution was fine. Whittaker's first story is fine. Again, it doesn't blow me out of the water, but I love the fact that it does something different with the Daleks. I like this version of this kind of recon Dalek where it can possess people the way it does. It does something different with the Daleks, and I think that's as scary as the Daleks have been probably since Dalek, actually. And again, shows how dangerous one Dalek can be. So it's one of the better episodes of the decade, even if it, again, isn't a grand slam by any means. So I definitely think the 2010s is the weakest, easily the weakest decade for the Daleks. Next on the list in 5th place is the 2020s. Now, we've only had, 2 Dalek stories? Really Dalek stories. I mean, they kind of show up in other stuff, like Flux, but not really. They're just kind of there because they need a villain. I don't really count Power of the Doctor as a Dalek episode. They're just kind of there. That happens in Modern Who a lot, where it's not really a Dalek episode. They're just kind of there. And Power of the Doctor is fine, so if you want to give the decade credit for it, that's fine. Because I do enjoy Power of the Doctor a lot, actually. But the 2 main Dalek-centric episodes I really enjoy. I like Revolution of the Daleks a lot, actually. I do enjoy that episode. It's the Daleks being the Daleks. I like the little redesign on the kind of human-made Daleks. I like how it ties in with Resolution with the cloning and the dangers of when God tries to play man. I love what happens when the real Daleks show up, see the other Daleks, and are like, no. I mean, that's very much the Daleks. It very much ties in with Revelation of the Daleks and Remembrance of the Daleks. That's very fitting to have a Dalek Civil War like that. It works. And I really enjoy that one. The ending of the episode is fine, even though the Doctor does kind of kill a TARDIS, which doesn't seem very Doctor-like. But other than that, that's pretty cool. And the effect of it, when the Daleks all swarm in the TARDIS and when it implodes, is some really good CGI. And then I like Eve of the Daleks a lot. I've only watched it the one time, but I liked it. It's a nice little spin on the Groundhog Day theme. And it adds a nice little wrinkle where each loop is getting shorter. And I like their new little Gatling guns, even if they can't hit worth flipping. They've been trained by stormtroopers. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good cast. I liked the guest cast in Eve of the Daleks. Both of them were really good. So both of the main Dalek stories I like in the 2020s. Even if, I think Whittaker's actually pretty good in Revolution of the Daleks. I think she's in Eve of the Daleks. She has that try-hard speech she does in the middle of it that doesn't land for me. But yeah, I don't think they've done a bad Dalek story yet. That's the reason why it's higher than the 2010s, even though we've only got a couple of them to go off of. In fourth place is the 2000s. We have Dalek, which is just amazing. That is a masterpiece and one of the best Doctor Who stories ever made. I love Dalek. It shows how deadly one Dalek is. It also shows that a Dalek can change, even if it's through outside means, which is a fascinating concept if you actually think about it. That a Dalek is the way it is simply because it was made to be that way, because the Daleks were engineered by Davros. So part of the reason they're the way they are is because they were created to be that way. So when you introduce an outside influence like Rose's DNA, it's interesting to see how that affects the Dalek as a whole and how it changes. And by the end of it, it's a very different type of creature. And that's actually quite fascinating for me. Eccleston is putting in one of the best performances a Doctor has ever done in a Dalek episode. It's never been more personal for the Doctor than it is here when it comes to the Daleks. Some of the best scenes in all of modern Who are in this episode when the Doctor is talking with the Dalek. I think Billy Piper's putting in a good job. The guy playing Lil Fauntleroy or whatever his name was, he's doing a good job. The guy playing Ben Statten is putting in a good job. You just love to not like him. Although you can respect that the guy is intelligent. You can tell he's pretty smart. So I really like Dalek. It just shows how deadly one Dalek is and how powerful the Daleks have become due to the events of the Time War. Then you have the Series 1 finale, which is good, especially Part 2. Part 1 is a little dated because of all of the TV show references. It's very dated to the mid-2000s. Part 2 is really good, though. The Deus Ex Machina ending actually works in what's going on in the story. It doesn't feel forced to me, and it leads to a nice regeneration. The Series 2 one I'm fine with as well, because I like that it starts off looking like it's a Cybermen story and then turns into a Dalek story. Plus, I love watching the Daleks put the smackdown on the Cybermen. That's so much fun. And it's nice to meet the Cult of Skaro, whose main objective is to think outside the Dalek box, or outside the Dalek sphere, so to speak. Or to think inside the Dalek sphere, I guess, since they're inside the sphere. But I like the fact that they're supposed to look at things in a non-Dalek way and come up with different solutions. That's why they have names. That's fascinating to me. I enjoyed it. I think the Dalek two-parter when they're in Manhattan in Series 3 is probably the weakest Dalek story of the decade. But I think it's underrated. I think it's fun. I used to really like it more than I do now, but I still do enjoy it. It's one that's good for a rewatch. Even if some of the aspects of it, like the pig people and stuff, I'm like, but it's a fun watch. I enjoy it. I will never get over that scene where your creator thought differently. He was wrong. He was what? I love that. He was wrong. He was what? Just to hear a Dalek say that Davros was wrong, I love the way Tennant reacts to that. And then you have Series 4, the ending to that, which again is good, but a little over the top. Let's be honest. Russell did have a tendency to like to top his previous finale, so now we're fighting for all of reality itself in every universe. The reality bomb. It's a very Davros thing to make, and a very Doctor Who thing for Davros to make. But it's very over the top, while still being fun, and I do like the fact it brings back a lot of the companions, and they don't just feel shoehorned in, they actually feel like they're doing stuff. It's a nice little epic adventure, but a little over the top. Now, the next one on the list, 2 and 3 get really, really hard to pick between, and I had to sit and think. Because I knew number 1 was going to be number 1, but 2 and 3 were really hard because they're both good. In third place, and this was again really hard, is the 80s. Now, to be clear, all 3 80s Dalek stories are very good. The 80s have a flawless record when it comes to Dalek stories. They really do. Resurrection of the Daleks is great. It is violent. It is dark. It's very much the Series 21 really is dark, much like Season 22. Season 22 has a reputation for being dark, but a lot of that really was in Season 21 as well. But Resurrection is great. It needs some updated effects very badly, very badly. If anyone who works on the collection box sets is listening to this video or watching this video, Resurrection needs updated effects. But it's a good story. I like the guest cast, even the small characters, like the people who were defending against the initial assault of the Daleks. We don't get a lot of time with them, but what time we do get with them is good. I really need to give this one a rewatch. It's been a while. I like Lytton. The guy playing him is good, who I recently just saw in the first episode of Blake 7. And then the guy who's like, I am a Dalek agent. I forget his name, but I liked him. And then you can understand why Tegan leaves the way she does at the end of it, because she goes through so much just over the course of this story and how it just wears her down to where she's ready to be done and it's not being fun anymore. It's a really good story. Revelation of the Daleks is really good. I think it's the weakest of the 3, but it's really good. It's got some excess bits in there that could have been trimmed out, like the guy who's basically the head coroner and the woman that's obsessed with him. But I love a lot of the other actors in it. I love the assassin guy and his squire. They're really good. I like that little cloak that Six wears in it a lot. And then just the actual story itself and how Davros and what Davros is doing is so evil. I enjoy that as well, plus some really good effects in it. It's a good story. And then Remembrance is a classic. It's a good story. I really appreciated it more after my last rewatch. It is a truly, truly good story. So as far as I'm concerned, the 80s have a pretty flawless record when it comes to Dalek stories. Just barely edging it out in second place is the 70s. 70s Doctor Who I find really good. Now, it doesn't quite have the flawless streak the 80s does, but it also has more Dalek stories. I find the weakest one of the decade to be Planet of the Daleks. It's the only one where I'm not really a fan of. It's perfectly watchable. It's fine. It's not bad, but I only go back to it every now and then. I usually watch it and Frontier together since they are kind of one story loosely. But it's the only one where I'm kind of like, eh. Destiny I like, oddly enough. It's weird how that one's grown on me. Maybe it's just my love for Tom Baker. Maybe it's the fact that just, especially at this point, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward have such good chemistry together. They're great on screen. I like the Movellans, even if I find their outfits a little silly and their weakness really silly. Just take the little thing off their waist. That's ridiculous. But Tom puts in a good performance. I think, especially on the box set when they got Davros's voice sounding right, that David's doing as good as he can in that situation, and the voice modulation really helps sell him better. Yeah, the sets look kind of crummy, and they're obviously in a quarter. It's obviously no budget for this one. But for some reason, I just find this one enjoyable. I rewatch it more than I do Genesis. For some reason, it's just this kind of comfort food I watch. It's one I can pop in at any time. We have Day of the Daleks, and most of you guys, if you watch my channel regularly, you know I love Day of the Daleks. I think it's a fascinating story. And it's done before that kind of story became as popular as it is now. It's really one of the first instances where I feel like it's that kind of time paradox thing that story does. Plus the updated effects and the special edition really sell me on it. And I think everybody's putting in a good performance. I love Day of the Daleks. And I enjoy Death to the Daleks. I think it's underrated. That's also another fun one for me. I love a lot of I've talked about it a million times, so I'm not going to go into it here, but you guys know I'm very fond of Death to the Daleks. Very underrated Dalek story. And then, of course, we have Genesis. And Genesis is Genesis. Genesis is amazing. Again, I've went on about it. I'm not going to go on about it, but Genesis is definitely the reason this one had to be in second place over the 80s. Without Genesis, I think I would have put the 80s in second place. But as good as the other story, as good as some of the other Dalek stories in this decade are, Genesis is carrying them all on its back up the mountain right here. All the other 70s Dalek stories, Genesis is carrying them up that mountain on its back. because Genesis is just one of the best. It is a phenomenal piece of work. It's well written, it's well directed, it's well acted. It's just essential Doctor Who viewing for any Doctor Who fan. And in first place is the 60s. It's really easy to see why Dalek Mania was a thing. And the fact that the Daleks could be the reason why Doctor Who endures to this day, since the Daleks, of course, was the second story in the show's run. Now, the original Daleks, you guys know I'm not as big of a fan of. It drags a bit. It's not bad by any means, and I absolutely love David Whittaker's Target novelization of it, and I also love the Peter Cushing movie of it. It's nice that we have so many different versions of this story. But even the original series version of it is good. It's not bad. My only issue is that it drags in places, but the sets look nice. The Daleks are an interesting concept. They're a fascinating design. The way their voices work is fascinating. And you can see why, especially keeping in mind this is something that was created in the early 60s, that the design has endured with modifications over the decades is highly impressive. Dalek Invasion of Earth is amazing. It's so iconic, seeing all those shots of the Daleks running around London and seeing the dire situation people are in. You have the Robo-Men, which are a fascinating precursor to the Cybermen, in some ways just as terrifying. It even explains really well in story that, you know, it does a good job of reminding you that these Robo-Men aren't just mindless soldiers. I mean, they kind of are now, but that they were once people. Because you have the one guy who's trying to find his brother, and how that situation resolves when he does find his brother. You have the one Robo-Man who gets knocked out, and when you see him on the ground, if you're paying attention, you'll notice he's wearing a wedding ring. When the doctors and the other guys are fighting him down, like in the sewers, one of them, the one when the doctor's like, no, leave them alone, he's wearing a wedding ring. You know, these were real people. That I like that. You have the two girls who turn in, Barbara, whoever it is they turn in. It's like Barbara and Susan, is it? I forget. But that's very much how some people would act in that kind of situation. They would turn on their own people to make their meager life just a little bit better. So I find the episode really good. It's easily my favorite of Hartnell's Dalek stories, but I've never seen Master Plan. That's still on the agenda. The Chase is hit or miss. I mean, the first two episodes the first episode of The Chase is good. The last episode of The Chase is good. You have a couple other little parts in there that are good. There's a lot of really bad in The Chase as well. It's very much a mixed bag. But then you have two of the greatest Dalek stories ever made, because nobody writes the Daleks the way David Whittaker writes the Daleks. Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks. They are both phenomenal. And they pole vault this decade into the lead on this list. They don't just cross over into the lead. They pole vault into the lead. I love Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks. And David Whittaker wrote them both. David Whittaker did a lot for Doctor Who that he really doesn't get credit for. And I absolutely recommend watching the Looking for David special that was on, was it the season 9 box set? I think it was the season 9 box set. Season 2, season 9? Forget. It might be the season 2 box set. But they have a wonderful presentation they do about David Whittaker. It was a really fun watch. And you find out just how important he was to those early days of Doctor Who. He was the first script editor for Doctor Who. And he writes the Daleks possibly better than anyone. Even better than Terry Nation, in my opinion. He gets that the Daleks are these manipulative geniuses who will do whatever they need to do, say whatever they need to say to get what they need, and then they'll turn on you and kill you. They use humans like a tool or a resource, and as soon as that tool or resource isn't useful anymore, they get rid of it. They throw it away. And that fascinates me, while still remembering how smart they are. I also really enjoy the Dalek voices in both of the stories. I love their voices in Evil and Power. They're just, it's such a crime that of the 13 episodes that make up those two stories, only one episode exists, episode 2 of Evil. And it's such a blessing to have both of those stories animated now, because they are amazing. So yeah, 60s Doctor Who, I think, is the best for the Daleks. It's the most impressive for me. And without those stories, the Daleks wouldn't be where they are. Doctor Who wouldn't be where it is. And that's another reason it deserves the first spot, because Dalek Mania was such a big thing in the 60s. We got 2 Peter Cushing movies out of it. That I definitely think 60s Who deserves the win on that. So I want to know what you think, and if you were ranking Doctor Who by decade as it pertains to the strength of the Dalek stories, how you would rank them, and what you think of my rankings. Comment down below and let me know. Other things to do, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon. If you would like to support me on that, there is a link to that down in the description below. It does help me keep the bills paid, especially in 2023. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you would like to send me to look at and review. And a link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I really appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It makes a difference. I have also started doing reviews for Blake 7, and the edited versions will come up on the channel. The unedited versions, however, will be on the Patreon, and they will. The first few episodes I know will be available for every tier. Even the $2 tier will have access to the full videos, unedited. If you want to see, just everything. I know I'll do that for the first few, and then all of them going forward after that will be available at least the $5 tier. One of my patrons is at my $5 tier level is the person who sent me that box set, and I wanted to make sure he's able to see all of those unedited ones. So all the Blake 7 reviews will be available at least the $5 tier, but the first 3 or 4 will be available even at the $2 tier, if anyone's interested in seeing the unedited version of those. Most importantly, thank you for watching. At the bottom of the list is... Why am I having to look again? It is so hot. Let's turn the AC down a little more. Why is it so freaking hot? Mississippi weather sucks.